Fellas, welcome back to the Redemption Podcast. And I have to say this to start out with, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for tuning into my videos, rocking with me, all the comments, all the subscriptions. I really appreciate that. The likes, it really matters. I'm building this thing. And of course, you guys know starting on YouTube takes a little bit of work, some consistency, and I'm continuing to work on that because this is new to me and just getting to a place where, I'm really focused on the content that I'm sharing. I want to be different and unique in a way that I share these messages. So I really appreciate that. But I want to say this before I get into the podcast is that, 2025 for me was a great year. There's a lot of great things that happened. And right now I already know, I already have things popping up on 2026 to start out the first quarter that are just going to be great. And I want to say, I hope for you that 2025 was great. I hope that, even in the challenging situations that you found some silver lining in that, right? I know that times happen, life hits us sometime. And part of the reason why I started this Redemption podcast is because of that. Personally, myself, there's things that I still want to accomplish. There's some things that I think I left on the table. And, there's a part of me that has this drive about redemption that is really about, fully becoming the man that God intended to me to be. Even though I work on it every day, I really think that I keep my lid open. I continue to grow. I continue to learn. I look for opportunities to do tough things, to continue challenging myself. And so I want to encourage you, when you look at and you're reflecting on 2025 and you're thinking about what's going into 2026, I really want to encourage you to do the same thing. But today we're going to talk today, and this is not a New Year thing. This is not like you need a new year. Really what you need is a new standard. So we're going to talk about that today, and I'm going to walk through this as best way I can, because I really want you to walk away from this podcast today really thinking about, what the difference is between having goals and having standards. And, I want to ask you this question. And the first thing I want to ask you, when you think about this year, what comes up first? What is it? Is it pride? Is it frustration? Is it regret? Some things that you wish you could have done. Maybe you're looking at the year and being like, I really wanted to do something. Maybe it's even, losing weight and keeping it off, right? Maybe it's that. Maybe it's saving money, getting out of debt, whatever that is, right? Building a business, growing in your career. What is that thing? Is it exhaustion? Are you tired? Are you beat down? And I know this is the time of year where, your foot comes off the gas because the year is ending and you're celebrating and all that kind of stuff. But I really want to ask the question, when you look at this year, what comes up first? I really want you to think about that, because most men at this time of the year, it's strange. You're still standing here, but you're not celebrating either. And, I think when I think about that, it's like you made it through, but how you made it through is you're not happy about that. And, I can tell you, and I'm going to get into some stories about some things that I've experienced myself, but that's the one thing that I think is super important when you start to think about where you're ending. Previous podcasts, I talked about the weight we're carrying. I talk about, all these things in terms of, what we go through and what we need to start doing or look at differently so that we can be the men that God intended us to be. And I say that because, I've said it before, is that, we're decaying, we're rotting because instead of speaking up, instead of, prioritizing ourselves first for those that matter to us, we are falling apart, and then it's hard for us to ask for help. We don't communicate. And a lot of that stuff really starts to, create bigger problems for us in the long run. So today when I talk, this is more about figuring out what your standards are and thinking about what you should be doing differently, especially going into the new year. And, what really happens here is that, you have this quiet conversation in your head and you keep telling yourself you're going to clean it up next year. Right? This next year, 2026 is going to be a better year for you. It's like the year ends and you're like, this is a primary opportunity for me to do better. And so when we start talking about this, where I feel like this happens to me is that, I think back to it's actually happened to me a couple of times, but I think in 2023, I think it was end of 2022 going into 2023, from 2017 to end of 2022, I think I locked in so hard. I'm talking about, I was traveling 22 days a month for almost 4.5 years, 5 years. And, my days started at like 3 o'clock in the morning, going to the gym. I would get back. Obviously I was working, I was away from home, and I'd work 10 to 12 hour days. The interesting thing about it was, I got tired, and I thought to myself like, hey, I'm going to give myself a break. And when I really thought about it, I was finishing out the year. I remember that I was thinking about some transitions I wanted to make, and I was like, I need a break. And although I thought this was important for me to, like, nothing was falling apart, but I just was like, especially when it came to like diet and exercise, waking up in the morning in this routine, I was like, this is almost killing me. But I was like, let me take a break. And what ended up happening is I got into a position where I finished out the year, but it was kind of mid. It was kind of like, right. And so I started the year the same way. Although I had goals and everything else, I was kind of telling myself like, hey, Z, you probably need a little mental break. Maybe you need to give yourself a challenge. And I remember January came and it went. February came around. I was like, okay, it's my birthday. I'm going to celebrate. And I remember telling myself, my birthday is February 16th, by the way. And I remember thinking at the time that, okay, I'm gonna be cool. Like, I'm gonna get through February. And like March came, and I kid you not, like what I felt like is that the way that I finished started my year out, and I thought I was going to be able to like rebound after that. And so, it wasn't like I'd stopped going to the gym. I just wasn't so strict on the things that I was doing, so habit driven, so routine driven, just to give myself that mental break. But here's the thing, like I said, it just was a part that I didn't fail. I just didn't finish strong either. And I feel like back at that time, maybe I could have done some things differently. And I share that with you because, if you're looking at this year and this is where you're at right now, it's important to really think about this. And I'll say this, like, I'm not here to judge anybody, but I've done it, and I've done it multiple times, and I had to catch myself and make sure, what did I learn from this? And so what I realize is that the calendar isn't the problem. The problem is that we've trained ourselves to believe that change only counts when it starts clean. And life really gives us that kind of start. And that's why I really want to talk about and start out with today, because January feels safe. And it does, because I feel like, you're all, you're organized. It feels like you got permission, new year, new energy, new you. But let's be honest for a second. Most men don't wait till January because they're strategic. It's not just that. They wait because it gives themselves excuse to delay their ownership. And because and here's the thing, like, if you say I'll start fresh next year, you don't have to deal with today. And that's the biggest thing. I think, I've been having conversations with people, because of course it's towards the end of the year right now, and everyone's like, oh yeah, next year, I'm going to finally do better, or next year I'm going to focus on this thing. And I just feel like that conversation happens a lot. What I really think happens, and this is something like I'll probably get into it right away, is that I realize when people have new goals every year, it's almost the fact that like you're going to continue having new goals every year. And I wonder if it's better, like, to be honest with you, it's almost like you should be refining the goals that you had, not making new ones. Like, what happened, right? If you had these goals to do something great in your life, multiple things, and maybe you started out with the motivation and everything was good, but then you got to a point where you kind of like forgot about it, or maybe the motivation or energy ran out. What makes it a bad thing? Like, I think about it even when I come to doing YouTube, like, I got to build up, my audience. I got to, build up my, subscriber base, because I don't know exactly what works or doesn't work yet, because I haven't done it enough. Like, I got to do it more. Right. And so sometimes we give something a little bit of effort and we think it doesn't work anymore. Or we try something one time or two times and then we forget about it, or we move on instead of keep working at it. And I realize, like, even with myself, my goals don't really change very much. That what they do is that I learn through the challenges I have. I look at the areas where and I have to be honest with myself, I look at the areas where I haven't really fully committed to things or fully done those things, and then recommit to those things and refine that goal so I can be more intentional about making sure that happens. Because everything I want to do is always good for me. And there might be an additional goal that might be new. Right. But I say this because when you keep putting things off, and you keep saying you're going to do it next year, it's going to be the same exact thing next year. And so, when I really get to this, I think the biggest thing is like, when you really think about the challenge you have by putting those things off, even me starting Redemption Podcast, I put a post on my Instagram about a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago. And I was so motivated. I was like, I'm going to start this Redemption Podcast. And I was like, trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to talk about? Because I don't want to get back on here and be like, oh, macros and this and that. And I can, and I will, but I'm like, it's not what I want to do. It's not the thing that I felt like I would get on here and be able to just, do consistently. But at the same time, I really wanted to speak to men directly about the challenges they're having and figuring things out. And in that process, what really came to light to me was I needed to make sure I had all my ducks in a row. I'm not a type of person who wants to talk about something, because I believe as a man, it's how you show up. It's not what you say, it's the things you produce. And so, yeah, I can say these things, but I want to be an example. And so, I looked at things that I needed to make sure, and I attacked those things. And I didn't feel right to come to this channel to build this Redemption Podcast and not have myself in a position where I can say these things honestly and talk about the things that are affecting me and the things that I talk about. Because for what it's worth, I look at this like when the year goes by and these become archives and videos that I created. Like, I want to look at what I built, but I also realize like I want to be honest and I want to be truthful where I'm at, and I want to continue working at that because I know that people resonate with that, and I know that this message is bigger than me. It's not just about me. But what I will tell you is, when you really think about the things that that you're doing in the areas that you're avoiding, a lot of the things we don't face is the inconsistencies in our lives. We don't face the excuses and the habits we already know aren't serving us. And that's what I really want you to start to think about when we go through this podcast, is that I get it and get it. Facing yourself takes courage. But here's the part most men miss. If you don't change how you finish, you'll usually repeat how you start. That's a dime. That's like right now. I'm telling you right now, it's like, again, if you don't change how you finish, you will usually repeat how you start. And that's why most people start over every year. And it feels like you're running in place and the patterns don't change. The date did, but the patterns haven't changed. And so when you start to really think about, what this year is going to look like for you in 2026, right? There's a new version of you. There's a better version of you. You got to work at it. I think there's too much trying to do something so drastic that sometimes you get burnt out, or sometimes you make the goal so big that you never obtain it. Not to say you shouldn't have audacious goals, but you don't even get halfway through before you give up or forget about it or let something else take its place. And so when you ask yourself and you're thinking about this, really, really think about what's going on. And here's when you realize something. Time has never been the solution. Standards are, because the men who don't drift aren't chasing motivation. And I could tell you right now, like, I was just having a conversation today, actually, and it was with another one of my peer groups, another coach. And he was like, yeah, man, most people haven't been doing this as long as us. He was like, like 20 something years. And I was like, I had to think about it. I was like, I've probably been working out since I was like 14, 15 years old. I'm 46, about to be 47. That's a little longer than that. I also have I've had the most amazing coaches in high school that taught me how to power lift and train like an athlete. And then I went to University of Colorado and had some of the best strength and conditioning coaches that in the world, and then I've been around some of the best coaches and trainers in my adult life as I've been in this space, and been trained by some of the best and learned from some of the best. And I've always applied, learning more and getting to a place where I really had to take ownership of my own success. And that was really, some of the reasons why I'm here today and why I have my own redemption story. And so I say that because when we think about it, when a man who doesn't drift, like I said, they're not chasing motivation, they're anchored to something deeper. They decided what they'll tolerate from themselves. They decide what they will tolerate from themselves. And I'll tell you, like, for me, people might say to me, like, people aren't as disciplined as you. I'm just like, I get to a point where I'm just like, I just don't do that. I don't think enough men say that. I just don't do that. And it has nothing to do about being better than anybody. It's just the fact that that's just what it is. And here's the thing. I think most men love goals because goals sound good. They sound hopeful. Goals look good written down. They really do. Like, I have some goals right here on my board, and they're actually more like standards, but I have them. But here's the thing, but goals without standards don't change behavior. And I like when I coach, that's the biggest thing. It's like, you got to change behavior. And I think the goal says, I want to be better. And the standard says, this is who I am, even when it's inconvenient. And, I think that, what makes this really important is like, I got to a point about 5 months ago. I was looking at my daily walking, right? And I noticed that I wasn't walking a lot because I'm working in my office and everything else. I go to the gym and work out, do some cardio, but I wasn't really getting a lot of steps in. But I saw that the previous year or so, I had actually went like 55 days walking like 15,000 steps, which was pretty awesome. I think it was like the month before. It was like I think I started in October, and then November, I got a group of people and I was like, hey, let's walk and let's do a contest up until Thanksgiving. And so I did that, and it was awesome. The thing about that though, is that was the most consistent I was. And I was thinking to myself like, I wonder if I could do 75 days, right? So I started walking, and I said, I'm going to start at like 11,000 steps. So I started walking, and I was getting close to 55 days, and I was like, I'm going to break. And I remember there were multiple times up to that 55 days where like I had a date with my wife, we had something going on, and I could have easily missed those days. And I'm talking about without planning it, without having made prior arrangements so I can get those steps in. And I remember it was kind of hard, to a point that like we might have went out and come back home, and at 10 o'clock at night, I went to walk because I needed to finish my steps. That's on me, right? The condition or situation was inconvenient. I just wanted to go to bed, but I finished my steps. Most people won't do that. So what I did is that I got to 75 steps. I was like, why did I pick 75? I know why 25 or 55 happened, because when Thanksgiving came, I rested and I hung out with my family, and then I let that day go by and it broke my streak. But I was like, let me get to 75. Then I was like, why 75 days? I said, why not 100? So I got to 100. And what ends up happening today, I think 155 days straight, which is over like 5 months of walking almost like, I think it's like 5.6 miles or something like that a day. But my point is that I realized in that situation that I got to a place where it wasn't about the time, it's just that I set non-negotiables and everything shifted for me. I realized why people quit on things. As I was doing it, there's so much stuff that comes up. And if it's not important to you, and it's not something that's a standard to you, you will let it go and you will replace it or have an excuse for it. And that's where I felt like, this kept me going. And by the way, like walking 12,000 steps for 150 something days, that's a lot of days, but going walking really isn't that hard. I mean, maybe someone may have a challenge doing that, but it wasn't really hard for me. And some people are like, oh, like walking doesn't change much. You work out. Like, why do you think walking? I'm like, try it. Like maybe walking for a day or two, or, a couple of days a week may not make a difference. Try walking 155 days straight. See how that works. See what that does for you. I can tell you right now, it's beautiful. And I'll get into a conversation about that in another podcast, but there's so many benefits in that. And it's not just, it's the daily stuff, but it's what it adds up, what it starts to do when you do it long-term. And I think that's where we got to start changing a lot of things. So, but this is the thing, because when I think about it, when life hits you, and it will, goals negotiate, standards don't. And I think that's where I've started to learn, and especially to really help other people, because, me wanting to, stay healthy, eat well, exercise, make sure that I'm doing all the right things, getting the proper sleep, recovery, all that kind of stuff. Like, there are so many people chasing these desperate things that I feel like, they're like, someone will work out 7 days a week, they'll restrict all this food. They'll do all this kind of stuff because they're trying to get to it right now. But there's all these stops and starts and stops and starts. And I've seen people, people I'm associated on social media and they'll be like, oh, I got to start over. Oh, I got to start over every week. Oh, I had a bad week, or I was off for 2 weeks. I got to start over and start over. Is because everything has got to be too hard instead of working on the long-term game. Like what I understand is that people want to get to their goals, but what I don't understand is trust the process, that if you do them consistently and you build on it, that's the best way. I mean, any short-term goal, any short-term diet you do, if you haven't built foundational things that are long-term, you're going to start and stop over again. And that is something that continues to happen, especially for us men. You get so focused, you might go to the doctor and the doctor gives you, a little bit of scare. Hey, your cholesterol is up or your blood pressure is bad. And you're like, well, I got to fix this. Well, you're only fixing it because the short-term issues, you need to make sure that you drop your cholesterol, your blood pressure, but then you're not becoming something that you should become. You're just fixing it. You're only reacting because you didn't feel good, or the doctor gave you a bad sign. And that's a good time to make a change, but you couldn't have made it before, and you can make it long term. And that's what I'm getting at. And so when you're tired, goals start whispering excuses. Standards say we still move, and that's the difference. Again, when you're tired, you'll negotiate with your goals. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. I'll get back on it, next week, Monday, right? But those standards are like, no, I got to do it now. Like tired, sore, whatever the case is, you just got to do it. And the thing is, there's so much of a benefit and so much you gain from that by doing that and accomplishing that. It's huge. So here's the thing: when you stop. Here's where it stops being about discipline and it starts being about identity. There's a moment in every man's life. There's a moment every man hits or they avoid. And it's a moment when you're tired of talking yourself in and out of the same thing. And, I'll tell you that you're tired of saying, I know what I need to do. And that's when standards become personal. You stop saying I'm trying and you start saying, I don't do that anymore. Like I said that earlier, right? And I'll tell you this, there's been times where there was a time it was, and I know the date because it was, it's so funny. I remember this, but I believe it was a Monday. I think it was April 2nd of 2017. And I remember it was actually the day before that. So I remember saying, when it comes to my food and it comes to me training, like I'm going to follow a plan. I'm going to prep my food. I'm going to measure it. I'm going to track it. I'm going to do this. And this is what I'm going to do. And I was like, it's enough, because what I was struggling with before that is like, I go to the gym and I'd lift hard. I'd, play a couple hours of basketball, because getting your cardio in. And, I just remember times where I would like take off my shirt. I'd be on vacation and I was like, I would hear people tell me like, I'd have a shirt on and like, oh yeah, man, you look like you work out. And I'm like, yeah, but in my mind, my standard, I was like, no, I took my shirt off. And my wife used to tell me, how good I look, but I didn't feel that way. And honestly, I didn't. And I wasn't, and it was because I was under eating. I wasn't following something consistently. And I said enough is enough, because what I really realized, because I studied, I knew all these things. I knew what was important. I knew how I was helping others. But I was like getting by because people assumed that I was in shape, even though I was like leaner. And I didn't. I had, I carried more body fat, my muscle tone. I didn't, I actually was probably somewhere around 20 pounds lighter than I am today. And the reality was like, I needed to do the work, but I was tired of it. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And so the reality is that I locked in and I took everything that I've learned, I've applied, and I applied it to myself. And I kid you not, like between April to June or July, we went to Vegas. I was like, okay, I see it. It's coming. And it was just a few months, but I was locked in. And those things happen because I focused on consistency. I focused on routine. I focused on things that were going to stick. I was going to make this work, not because I worked hard, is that I was going to be smart about it. And I was going to create something that I was going to build a habit around. And, we say that word habit, but it is the little stuff that you do. Like when I look at it, I was like, I have to eat. All I need to do is prep food. I got to figure out the timing. And then the other thing was I was choosing better food for myself. I wasn't eating Subway. I wasn't eating skipping breakfast or fasting or not eating snacks in between my breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like I did all those things right. And what was crazy about it is that it wasn't hard. And when I started to do it, it was like, oh, this fits. Like I'm already training. Now I got the food locked in. And then what it started to do is like my morning started to change because my morning started to elevate. My day started to like, I had way more energy. I started showing up way more confident. But that's because I got clarity. And it wasn't about how I felt. It wasn't like me being, oh, I got to be emotional. I got to be motivated, right? It was the fact that like I saw it clearly. I knew exactly what I needed to do. And I think what happened is like, it wasn't ego anymore. It was out of clarity. It was out of the fact that like, I never compare myself to other people. My biggest thing is being better than the version of myself because I know I have it in me. But the reality was, it was because clarity is powerful. And when a man knows who he is, life gets quieter. And that's something I can tell you right now. Even today, it's even quieter and quieter. I even said it the other day. Someone was like, how are you doing, man? I'm great. I'm like, there's peace right now because things are they make sense. Decisions become simpler. Energy gets more focused. And that's the thing. Like when I'm in, doing my career work and when I'm working with people, like things just become so obvious and so clear and so easy for me that it's because of all these things. And here's the thing. Let me bring this back to real life because it sounds good, but it doesn't change your day to day. It doesn't matter. Like if we're not changing what you're doing every day, even me telling you about what I've been through, if it's not changing, it doesn't matter. So, you don't need a long list. You need a short list that you can respect. And that's when you're starting to build standards that you stick to. Okay. And it's not goals or any of that. And I want to tell you, some of the standards that you can think about is, every day for me, I get up, my standard is to get up in the morning and the first thing I do is spend time with God. Typically I pray, I write a prayer, I post it on my story. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that on my story, I post a prayer every day. And I've been very intentional about that because I want those that are connected to me. If you're not praying, I write it in a way that if you read it, you can pray it yourself. And just because, something I'm sharing with you, it's personal. I want to make sure that I can do that. So that's a standard. Second thing is that I always, for me, is I got to move, I got to work out, I got to lift. And some days, my rest days, I don't lift. I'll go for long walks. I'm talking about like at least 75 minutes at the minimum. And I do that because I just have to move. I think the other standard I have too is, and I had to work on this because I've been an entrepreneur and having so many goals, standards, being present at home. And so I've had to make sure that that's what I do. And so those are three things that I can just say, you can make it 5 things if you want. But the biggest thing is that you need to respect that list. Right. I think at the end of the day, and that's it. Like if you don't respect it, then it's, like, what's the point? So think about these things. If you're thinking about today, what you can do from this message is build some standards that you'll stick to. Make sure you respect them. Make sure you do them, and being present, I've had to leave my phone in another room because again, I might get messages from people on social media. I might be looking at stuff, whatever it is, but there's times I need to spend time with my wife. We're going on 13 years, 16 years together, 13 years married. I got to do better. Right. And these things are not like flashy, but they're personal to me. It matters to me. I mean, I when I talk about being a better man, being a better husband and a father, those things, it's great to have goals, but it's like, what does that mean? Be more present, learn how to speak softer, when it comes to being a better father. My kids are older. I've had to adjust. Me and my wife are adjusting. They're older. The youngest is 19, 22, and about to be 29. Like there's a different version of me and I have to understand. And I've realized I've gotten wiser. I've learned how to deal with things differently. Right. So that's why it's important to me. So when standards are clear, your days stop feeling chaotic. And I can tell you right now, there's some days like this, not perfect, and I don't want to even sound like that, but I would say the majority of everything, if you ask me what percentage of my life throughout the year felt like it was free of chaos, I would say 95% of it, to be honest. And it's because of these things, I realized those other days, there might be something that's off. It's hard. I mean, I just recently had a day the other day, something felt heavy and I couldn't shake it. I told my wife I couldn't shake it. I was going to the gym, sat in the car for a minute. I was hanging, I don't know what it was, but the thing I will tell you is I sat in it. I was honest to myself and I sat in it. But the reality is, because of my standards, I don't rock like that. And so that changes because of those standards I have. And so, when you think about these standards, you don't wake up asking what I should do today. You wake up knowing who you are. And that's why those things really matter and stick with me. So this is what I want to leave you with. You don't need a new year. I said it before. You need a standard you're willing to live by when no one's watching. And because of that, because the men who change their lives don't do it in loud moments. They do it in quiet ones. When quitting would be easier and nobody would notice. And so here's the thing, I can tell you, some of the things that, I can say this, and I'll say this way. One of the biggest challenges I had was when the pandemic hit and I went from being an in-person consultant, running my own business. I'd started a little earlier, but 2016, started my own business and went out, left my career job and worked on my own. And in that process, when the pandemic happened, I couldn't do in-person consulting anymore because, people weren't being around each other. And in that process, there was a lot of stuff that had to happen. Even before the pandemic, actually, I quit because I decided to come home to be with my family. So I was gone so long. But I can tell you this, there were so many days and nights where I was trying to figure things out. And there were times where I just felt like I stayed up late at night because I was trying to think about what I got to do, right? I have family, I got responsibilities, bills, all that kind of stuff. And I would be up at night. And there are some days I'd go to sleep and I feel like I just didn't do enough. But the reality is like, I didn't quit. It was hard for me. Like it just was. It was hard. Sometimes I get emotional about it, but it was hard. And, I figured, I'll figure this out. And I had to do some changes. I had to like look at, look at myself and look at life for what it was. And there's a lot of things that people didn't see, including my wife. I didn't get any applause for it. Nobody was over here, telling me, what to do or what not. But I worked. There was times I had to ask for help. But the reality is that it was a win for me. Every day that I got up and I kept working. I kept working and I kept working. And, some people say, oh, Z, you haven't experienced this. And I'm like, sometimes I tell people like, don't assume anything. Right. And, in that process, all these things worked in my favor because although I was going through all these hard times, the truth came out. Like what was important to me? What were my standards? What was I going to live by? Who was I going to be? Who do I want to become? Who do I got to work on? And honestly, even to my wife to look at like I never had a situation married with my wife in a situation where things were hard. And I mean, I should say they were hard, but not like that. Not on me, just personally. And I figured it out because I didn't quit because it wasn't about getting up every day and being motivated. Yeah, there was there purpose to push me. Yeah, but I could have easily given up. But that's not who I am. And that's not who I decided to be. That's why I still stand here today. I've overcome a lot of things, injuries, personal things in my life I've overcome. And I've decided that's who I am. And that's how, when you talk about finishing strong and you talk about starting and doing the things that you become, that's what it becomes. And this is the thing. I think what I'm getting at is, if you're here right now, it's because something in you wants more motivation, and that's good. So stay here, build with me and decide who you are and move like it. And I'll say this to end, one of the things I'll say is with 2026 around the corner, I wish you, your family, and everyone you love, the most prosperous, most blessed, and most successful year in 2026. A lot of the things what I'm talking about to you guys is there is something about you that I know is greater. The problem is that unless you create these standards, unless you are really honest with yourself and you start making these changes, nothing's going to happen. I hope that as you rock with me in this Redemption podcast and get to know me more, that, you get a sense of why I'm doing this. And I hope that I can connect with you guys, more of you, and help you really build the courage to see yourself for where you are, where you're growing, and start making those changes. So with that being said, Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to your family. I wish you nothing but the best. I pray for your health. And that's one of the first things. I pray that the challenges you have, that you see through those silver linings, what God is trying to do for you in your life, where he's leading you. I pray that you, every day that you get up and you pray, you get closer to God, because it's important. And I believe that as you continue to work on yourself, it's not just about saying something. It's about doing those things. It's not about being, having these audacious things that you do. It's about being consistent every day. Be a real man and do the things you're supposed to do every day. And if you're doing a lot of those things, congratulations to you, man. Keep that up. Keep pushing. Keep grinding. That's what I'm talking about. So this is it. That's it for this episode. I really appreciate you guys. Again, thank you guys for your subscription. You've been watching this the whole time. We'll have some fire. I'm going to take a little bit of a break. Taking a family trip, but I just want to make sure that you guys know that with this year going into 2026, it's about to be fire. And I know that the things that we're going to talk about, the things that I'm going to share with you guys, it's going to be next level. So I enjoy what I'm doing here, and I appreciate you guys again. God bless you. Have a great end of your year. Be safe, be healthy, and continue to work on being the man that God intended you to be. Peace. Let's go.